The most common complaint I've received from thousands of golfers is that they are hitting it great on the range, but then that golfer is nowhere to be found on the course. But if you want to get ahead of 99% of players who are mindlessly hitting golf balls at the driving range, you need to approach your practice habits differently and learn to spend your time more efficiently. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to do that with 5 methods a golfer of any level can use in their next range session. Hi, my name is Jon Sherman. I'm the author of The 4 Foundations of Golf, co-host of the Sweet Spot podcast, and PGA Tour coach. Most importantly, I am a golfer just like you. So before I get into the methods that I know can help all of you, I want to talk about the #1 mistake that most golfers are making when they practice. And it's something that I like to call zombie range sessions. So when I was a junior golfer, I would show up to the range and I'd spend hours thinking that if I devoted this time, I would automatically get better. And the trap I fell into was the following. I would hit ball after ball after ball to the same exact target, and eventually I would get into a groove and start hitting some good ones and kind of discard the shots that I didn't like. And I would hit 20, 30, or even 47 irons in a row or a driver. And then I would get to the golf course and these shots were nowhere to be found, and I would lose my mind and get angry. If that sounds familiar, it's likely happening to you and many other golfers who show up to the driving range with the same intentions. They're either working on some swing tips that they got from YouTube, they're just raking balls through their bucket mindlessly and hitting the same shot over and over again. And they really don't have 2 of the most successful things that you need to practice effectively, which is intent and absorbing feedback. And the methods I'm going to discuss with you that I've used for over the last decade accomplish those 2 tasks. So if you're frustrated by showing up to the driving range and you feel like you're getting worse, it's likely because you're doing the same thing over and over again and you're just ingraining bad habits. So I'm going to teach you how to get a bit outside of the box and work on other things outside of just the technique of your golf swing that will move the needle during your rounds. So the first category of effective practice is what I call working on impact skills. Now this is not the same as working on technique, and let me explain the difference briefly. So if you were working on the technical elements of your golf swing, you're mostly working on how your body moves. So it could be how you're gripping the club, a strong or a weak grip. You could be working on how deep of a shoulder turn you're making. You could be working on your takeaway or how your hips are moving throughout the golf swing. So essentially you're taking body parts and you're working on them consciously and trying to make a change. Now, I'm not against that. Getting swing lessons with technical work can absolutely help most of you, but a lot of golfers are on their own and they do this type of technical work without any really knowledge of what it's doing. Sometimes they just want to make it look prettier on videos, or sometimes they've watched 10, 20, or even 30 YouTube videos on different swing philosophies, and then they're trying to do that at the range. So what I would suggest is scrapping that a bit and working on impact skills. And if you've listened to the podcast that I co-host with Adam Young, you know that we always talk about the big 3, and this is how you can challenge yourself while you practice to do the magic word that we always talk about, self-organize. And what essentially that means is that you're asking yourself to perform a certain task when you practice, like striking a certain part of the club face, and then your body will hopefully self-organize to accomplish that task, and your technique might change without you thinking about it. So the big 3 that you can work on while you practice are impacts location, start direction, and ground contact, and I'll explain all of them briefly. Impact location is fairly simple. Get yourself a can of Dr. Scholl's Odor X, spray the club face, and you're looking for tendencies. Are you striking it on the toe? Are you striking it on the heel? Or maybe higher or lower on the club face? You essentially want to establish what that impact feels like in your hands and the visual feedback when you see where it made contact with the club face. And then your goal is simple. Can you challenge yourself to strike different parts of the face? Can you move it closer to the toe? Can you move it closer to the heel? Obviously you want to strike the center as well, but exploring both options can help move your patterns around the face. And more importantly, with your driver, you can also explore high and low on the club face. So again, you're asking yourself to accomplish a task, and I promise you when you do this type of practice, something really interesting will happen where you'll make that connection with where you're striking on the club face and the types of internal feels and moves you're trying to make in your swing to accomplish that task. And again, your body will self-organize like an athlete versus only thinking about maybe your wrist hinge or what your elbows are doing during your swing, and that might not even be helpful. The other thing you can focus on is starting the ball in different directions, which is really club face control. Can you start it to the left of your target, to the right of your target, down the target line, and challenging yourself to move your start direction around. And essentially what you end up doing is building different reference points in your golf swing with club face control. For me, you've heard me talk about how I rotate my forearm to move that club face more open or closed when I need it. Last but not least is ground contact. You can experiment with having the club bottom out in different parts of the ground. Now, I know this is a bit harder with artificial turf. You can get yourself a training aid like the divot board to see a visual representation of where you're making contact with the ground. And essentially, if it's too far behind the ball, you can challenge yourself to move it in front of the ball. That might make you change your weight distribution to the front of your swing. You might change ball position. So essentially you're experimenting with these different intentions to, again, accomplish the task. So I think working on your impact skills when you practice is arguably the most effective tool that a golfer who is going at it alone can do, because you're going to be working on the most important things in your golf swing without technically thinking about them because you're so focused on maybe impact location only. I'll do another video where I go way more in depth on the big three, but let me head on to my next practice habit, which I call my fight fire with fire method. And this one's really simple, and it is related to the impact training. You essentially want to do the opposite of your fault. So if you are a slicer, I want you to try and hit a hook. You might have to change your swing path. You might have to change your alignment, getting more closed. You can experiment with ball position or feeling a more rounded golf swing. I want you to do anything possible to hit that hook. And essentially what I'm really asking you to do is feel the opposite end of the spectrum. And when you do explore the opposite end of any spectrum, it can help with your current fault. So by hitting more hooks, you can move your swing path a little less out to in and get closer to what I call neutral territory. Now this can work with impact location. I'm a heel striker. Sometimes I have to work on consciously striking it on the toe to move my impact location closer to center. You can do this with ground contact if you're too far behind the ball or too in front of it. A lot of you struggle with hitting the ball way too high and you're kind of scooping at it with your hands behind the ball at impact. You can experiment with presetting your hands way far ahead of the ball and adding a ton more shaft lean with, let's say, a wedge or an 8-iron to try and hit the ball lower. So there's so many different examples of how you could do the opposite of your fault, but I find this is one of the most effective practice methods out there, and it's how I went from having a really excessive hook about a decade ago to straightening out my ball flight by essentially trying to hit fades and doing the opposite. So whatever's plaguing you in your golf game, this is one practice method that you can infuse into your next session that I promise will yield some results and get you out of swing jail and thinking about your technique way too much. So the next method is all about playing like you're a child. So most of you watching this are probably adults, and when we get later into life, we get comfortable doing the same thing over and over again. We show up to the driving range, we like to hit the same shots and work on stuff that makes us feel comfortable. But I'd love for you to think about playing like a child a bit and getting way outside the box and essentially trying to pull off shots that you might not hit on the golf course, but what they'll do is that they'll build more reference points in your golf swing so you can control the club face and strike in that impact interval. So there's a few ways you can do this. The easiest way is to experiment with trajectory and shot shapes. Another great way to do this is with wedge play. If you have access to a facility where you can give yourself a bunch of different lies in the rough, try to hit it low with a pitching wedge, try and hit it high with a lob wedge, and vice versa, where you're essentially manipulating the loft in a bunch of different lies. You can pick the same target maybe 10 yards away and try and hit a low, medium, and high trajectory with different wedges. You can also do this with your full clubs. You can pick a target that's 125 yards away and try and hit your pitching wedge, 7-iron, or even your driver to that distance. You're going to be experimenting with different swing speeds, probably changing ball position, and a bunch of other things that you won't necessarily have to think about. But again, you're trying to accomplish this task and your body will learn to self-organize around it and improve at it. So experimentation can be really helpful, as I said, building different reference points in your golf swing and improving your ball striking. You don't have to spend 50% of your practice sessions doing this, but if you take maybe 5, 10, or 15% of your time and just kind of mess around and try and have fun with it, try and hit a 4-iron really high or a pitching wedge really low. Some of the stuff that I would do more when I was a kid and first taking up the game, I think you're gonna see some interesting progress on the golf course when your swing gets out of whack and you have to make adjustments. And when you try to explore all these different things and more importantly, have fun with it, I'm pretty sure you're going to see some progress rather than just hitting your 7-iron to the same target 40 times in a row. A huge thank you to the sponsor of this video, Chomps. I don't know about you, but I get really hungry on the golf course, and I found that jerky is a great way to keep myself full without eating a bunch of junk. Chomps offers tons of delicious flavors, but more importantly, there's 0 grams of sugar, and you get 10 grams of high-quality protein with only 100 calories per stick. I've been enjoying their jalapeno flavor, and they've got tons of other ones like smoky barbecue, Italian style, and sea salt. More importantly, my daughter, who is a really picky eater at times, loves them too, so she's been allowing us to pack them in her lunch sometimes. So if you want a snack that's easy to put in your golf bag without making a mess, or you can take it with you to work or the gym, it fits in with our sometimes really busy lifestyles. To learn more about Chomps or find one of the 30,000 stores that carries them, click the link in the description below and tell me in the comments section what is your favorite flavor. Now let's get back to helping you become better at practicing. So the next practice method that has been instrumental in my game and thousands of other golfers is working on your swing tempo. The timing of your golf swing is really important, but most players don't know how to work on it because they speak about swing tempo in a really generic way. You've often heard the advice, swing smooth or have a slow takeaway or a smooth transition, and they all sound nice, but the problem is that there's really nothing to benchmark it just based on words. Some golfers will take those phrases and do something wildly different, which is why I love people working with tempo beats. It gives you the exact timing of your golf swing to rehearse your start, transition, and impact, and more importantly, it gets you to stop thinking about your swing and getting back to that golden phrase I keep talking about, self-organization. So I'll do a whole other video on swing tempo, but my #1 recommendation on this is always the Tour Tempo app. It's in my book. Thousands of golfers have used it for over a decade, and it's one of the best training aids that I can think of that's actually quite inexpensive and doesn't give you false promises like many of the other ones in the industry. So I'll just show you quickly how it works just to give you an idea. So in the app, you'll have different time signatures, all in a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning the length and time elapsed of your backswing should be 3 times as long as your downswing. So if you were to work with a normal metronome, you're not going to be getting beats that are rehearsed like an actual golf swing. So here's what it sounds like. So you're trying to match start, top, hit. So you're trying to match the beats to start your swing, get to the top, and hit. And there's different speeds on this. So when I first started, I was on the slower speed. After a while, I realized I was hitting much better shots when I got faster. Dun, dun, dun. So I would play these beats for hours while I was practicing, and I was simply trying to match my swing to the beats. And something really interesting happens. I started to remove a bunch of funky positions in my backswing because I was going way too slow. And when I actually tried to quicken the pace up to be in the right tempo, they would all kind of disappear without me thinking about them. So this is a great practice method to flush out all of the swing thoughts, try and accomplish one goal. And when you get really good timing in your golf swing, a lot of bad technical mess starts to go away without you actively trying to fix it. And to me, that's a more efficient way to get to where you want to go as a ball striker versus taking shots in the dark with your technique and saying, oh, I don't like the length of my backswing, maybe I'll shorten it. You have no idea if that's the right thing to do or not. So the Tour Tempo app, I think, is like $25 in the App Store. It's one of the cheaper training aids out there, and I highly recommend using it in some of your practice sessions. And I think some of you will get some major relief with your irons, driver, and there are even beats for your putting and wedge play too. So give it a shot, and I think you'll be surprised by the results. So the next method is very simple. It's just called randomization. So as I said, a lot of golfers get stuck in these zombie range sessions where they're just raking ball after ball and hitting to the same target over and over again. And to break up that monotony and give more intent to each shot, just randomize your target and club selection. So instead of hitting 5 or 10 7-irons in a row, hit a 7-iron, then switch to a pitching wedge and change your target, and then hit your driver, and then maybe hit your lob wedge. Try and cycle through your golf bag and hit to different targets and pick different clubs. And what this really gets you to do is essentially have a quick mental reset after every shot. You want to step away from your mat for a second. Take a look at where you're trying to aim and establish some intent for the shot, and just take a little time to breathe and let your body absorb feedback, which I'll get to at the end of this video. I'm not against repetitive practice, which is called block practice. I do a ton of it myself, but you have to be engaged properly. And some golfers just don't have the discipline or know-how to do that. So one thing you could do is just switch things up so that you can take a step back from the basket of balls and stop raking them quickly over and over again, and just go through different targets and club selections. And this is a way to just add more intent and engagement to your range sessions. Now, I think I said at the beginning of the video, I was going to give you 5 practice methods. I think this is number 6, so I guess this can be a bonus. Another easy way to have a more effective practice routine is put more pressure on yourself. Play performance games. There's so many of them that are available at this point for putting, chipping, your full swing, and you could do it on simulators now. There's tons of software to help you with this. But essentially what you want to do is mimic the environment that you're going to face on the golf course. You only have one chance to hit that shot, and it means way more to you in that scenario versus the range where you know you can take 20 more cracks at it to hit a good shot. So you want to put more pressure on each shot, give it more intent and more competitiveness, so you feel that pressure and you can prepare yourself for when you're going to face it on the first tee and for the rest of your round. So there's a great app that I've been involved with called Tee Time Trainer that has a ton of games for pretty much any club in your bag, whether you're at the driving range or at a simulator. And they're kind of like video game-like challenges where you're going to get a score after each of them, whether you're trying to hit your driver in a certain window, trying to hit your wedge to certain distances, or make a certain amount of putts from different distances. Again, it makes it fun. It breaks up the monotony of those zombie range sessions and puts more pressure on each shot. So you can design these games for yourself. Check out that app, and there's plenty of other resources in the golf world for different performance games. But either way, you've got to find a way to put more meaning and pressure on each shot so that you don't have a false positive when you hit that 7-iron really well for the 15th time in a row. You want to know how you're hitting it when you've taken time to choose a target, your shot intention, and then know that after the shot, you're going to have a grade for yourself, whether or not it was really good or a poor shot, so that again, you can simulate the environment you will face on the golf course. This is one of the biggest mistakes that all golfers are making when they practice. The range environment does not mimic the on-course environment, and you have to do your best to bridge the two. So all the methods I've discussed on this video, whether it's impact training, tempo training, or playing performance games, these are all great habits to add to your practice sessions, but they won't work if you're not doing the most important thing, which is absorbing feedback along the way. All great golfers are really intentional on each shot they hit when they practice in absorbing the feedback. On some level, they're asking themselves, how did I strike it on the face? How is my start direction? Where did the ball land relative to my target? And so many golfers don't even have the basic intent of having a target, and they can't measure whether the shot was good or bad or what they need to do to adjust on the next one. So on some basic level, when you're at the range, each shot should have a target. It should have a shot intention, and then you simply take a step back after each shot and absorb feedback. How did the ball curve through the air? Did it start on your intended direction, which would be a signal of your club face control? Was that a toe strike? Was that a heel strike? If you've sprayed the face, then you can see that. How was my ground contact? Was it a little bit too far behind the ball and it kind of bounced up and I got away with a good shot there when I wouldn't have on the course? Was the shot really high? Was it really low? So all along the way, you're picking up on all these little clues after each shot, and then you're trying to make small adjustments and intentions for the next one to see if you can figure it out. So no matter what type of practice you're doing, whether it's blocked, random, a performance game, always ask these questions and be a detective when you're practicing and absorb this feedback and experiment with the changes you need to move your impact pattern or start direction to a more functional territory. These are the basic building blocks on how you can transfer that practice game to the golf course. But always know that no matter how good you get at practicing or even on the course, there will be a gap between the two. Now you can make that gap smaller, but you're never going to be the exact same golfer on the range that you will be on the course, because these are two different environments. On the golf course, you're worrying about your score, you're distracted by playing partners. There's a lot more stuff tugging at your brain than happens in the practice environment. But do your best to bring that environment to your practice, and you can bridge the gap a bit. So if you want to go way more in depth on each of these practice topics, these are all small little snippets from my book, The 4 Foundations of Golf, which you can purchase on Amazon. You can listen to our podcast, The Sweet Spot, where Adam Young and myself are always talking about creative ways to practice and give you ideas on how to make it more meaningful. And don't miss my last video where I tell you 9 methods on how to overcome your first tee jitters.